Shalom, peace and blessings with everybody, and salam alaikum for those watching. We're here from Universal God Message of Peace. I'm Lale Tunser. This is Rabbi Lee Weissman, and this is Dr. Khalid Zahir. And we're here today, part of our weekly Abrahamic dialogue session. This week, we're going to be listening to Rabbi Weissman tell us all about the 10 Commandments. Bezrat Hashem. So over to you, Rabbi Weissman.
Okay. So in great Jewish tradition, I'm going to begin with a joke. So there was once a rabbi, and he was a young rabbi who came to a congregation of older people. And it was coming on the holiday of Shavuot, which is the holiday that just passed. And on Shavuot, we read the 10 Commandments, actually. So there was they started to read the 10 Commandments, and he noticed that there were some people who were sitting down, and there were some people who were standing up. And the people who were standing up were yelling at the people who were sitting down and said, "Stand up, stand up." And the people who were sitting down were yelling at the people standing up, going, "Sit down, sit down." So finally, after it's all over, he takes three of the older gentlemen, the seniors of the community, most learned older men of the community, and he sits them down. He says, I've just come to this community and I want to understand what your customs are. I want to understand, what you've been doing. He says, so on Shavuot, when you come to the 10 Commandments, what is the custom here? So one guy says, the custom is to sit. And the other guy says, the custom is to stand. And the third guy, they asked the third guy, he says, what do you think the custom is? He says, that's the custom. One guy sits, the other guy stands, and then they yell at each other.
That's really
good.
Now there's a deep teaching actually behind that joke. This is actually a very a deep legal question in Judaism, whether or not you should stand up for the 10 Commandments. In some communities, people did stand, right, when the 10 Commandments were recited. And in other communities, they would sit as normal. So based on two different arguments. So one argument was, well, this is something which is very important, right? This is an important, momentous occasion on the 50th day after the 50th day after coming out of Egypt on Mount Sinai. These are the words that were engraved in the tablets. So, well, of course, we should stand. We should show respect. Right? The other argument is, well, wait a second. It says the Talmud says that back in the old days, a long time ago in the temple, they used to read the 10 Commandments every day. They used to recite the 10 Commandments every day in public. So the priests would come out and they would recite them. He says, and then the rabbis stopped it. Why did they stop it? They stopped it because it gave the impression that somehow or another, these were more important than all the other commandments. So therefore, right, we shouldn't stand. Because if we stand, it's as if we're saying that all the other commandments are not as important, and these are somehow more important than all the others, the other 610 commandments, 603 commandments. I'm not very good at math. So this is a really interesting argument, right? Are these 10 commandments any different from the others, from the other 603, or are they different? So qualitatively, they are different in the sense that they are more general. And in fact, there have been people who have said, well, okay, we can actually find all 613 commandments folded up into these 10. Now, the attempts to do that are, you have to stretch a little bit in order to be able to do that. It's not so simple to do that, but they found a way to do that. The second problem is that there's no such things as the 10 commandments. The Torah itself doesn't call them commandments. They're called the Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 statements, which is interesting, the 10 statements, which on the one hand says, well, okay, it's curious that they don't call them that. At the same time also, the world was created with 10 statements, right? The world was created, the at the beginning of the creation, right? We said the world was created with 10 statements. So in some way, this is a kind of parallel to the creation. And so there is something which is really, really important, really important about these about the 10 Commandments. Now, at the same time, I would argue that the most important word in the entire Torah consists of one letter, and it occurs immediately after the 10 Commandments. So it gives the 10 Commandments, and we get the 10 Commandments, and immediately after, it has the words Ve'eleh HaMishpatim. And it says, and these are the laws, right, that Moshe set before Bnei Yisrael. And then it lists a whole bunch of social laws about how one treats one's servants, and laws about weights and measures and all of these kinds of things. And that word "and," there's an and these laws. So the rabbis explain, the commentators explain, what is that "and" doing there? The "and" is to say, just like these laws, these big laws are important, right? These big laws, the 10 Commandments are important. So are all these little social laws. Don't just think that your relationship with God consists of these 10 big things, but no, it's all the little things that you do. It's all of those things. So that one letter, Vav, Wa, right? Wa in Arabic, right? And, right? That one Wa, that one Arabic, that one and is probably the most important word and letter in the entire Torah, because it tells us that the small things are important in the same way that the big things are. But let's talk about the big things, because that's what we decided we're going to talk about today. So the 10 Commandments. The first commandment is, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. That is simply to believe in God. Now, interesting, by the way, the great jurist Maimonides, right, says it's not just to believe in God, but to know there is a God. To know there is a God, right? It's different than belief. Belief is in something that we can't possibly know, but he says that we actually have to know that there is a God. And we have to know that this is the God who brought us out of Egypt, not just a God who is the creator of heaven, not just a God who is the creator of heaven and earth, but the God who is active in history and who performs miracles, right? Who is also in control, right? In control of all nature, right? In control of all nature, not just in the past, but in the present. So then he says, this is number 2. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make yourself a graven image or any manner of likeness of anything that is heaven above, that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the under the earth. You shall not bow to them, serve them, for I am the Lord your God. I'm a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, the 3rd and 4th generation that hate me, showing mercy unto the 1,000th generation that love me and keep my commandments. This is really against idolatry, about associating anything with God, that God is absolutely one, and should not be depicted in any kind of manner or likeness. 3rd, don't take the name of your God in vain, for the Lord will hold him guiltless, will not hold the person guiltless for taking his name in vain. This is particularly using God's name in a casual way, right? We should not be, right? We should be using God's name when we pray, when we address him, when we address him directly, but we should not be casual when we talk about God. But we should always be talking about God with respect, and even God's written name, right? Treating that with respect, because the name represents the way that we relate to God, we know God, right? It's an important way of our relationship with him. So be careful with God's name. So fourthly, to remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Now there are two versions of there are two versions of the Ten Commandments in the Torah. One in the book of Exodus, the book of Shemot, and the other in the book of Dvarim, the book of Deuteronomy. The first one is God's account, so to speak. God's account, so to speak, of the Ten Commandments. And the second is the rephrasing of Moses, right? Because the Deuteronomy, the book of Deuteronomy, is really the extended farewell sermon of Moses, in which he gives a summary of the entire Torah. He actually reviews the entire Torah, and he puts forth again under divine inspiration. He puts forth certain focuses, and so even in the Ten Commandments, in Devarim it's a little bit longer, and there's also some slight differences. So, for example, here where it says "Remember the Sabbath day," in the Deuteronomy version, it says "Keep the Sabbath day, protect the Sabbath day." So the way we understand, beautiful comment in the Talmud says, how can it be? Which one did God say? And so they say the Shamor v'Zachor b'dibor echad. He said Shamor, he said keep, and Zachor, to remember, in the same breath, right? So to speak, in the same word, right? It was heard at the same time because it's two sides of the same coin, right? Right? Zachor, to remember, is the positive commandments of Shabbat, the positive commandments of the Sabbath, all the ways in which we bring to mind God's creation of the world on the Sabbath. And the Shamor is the ways in which we protect that space, right? And that's through all the prohibitions of Shabbat, right? Because you're prohibited from working on Shabbat, and our behavior on Shabbat is completely different from behavior the rest of the week, right? Completely different. It's as if you're going into a completely different mode of being on Shabbat, and so we have those two dimensions. We have the remembering and the protecting. So remember the Sabbath day, keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. A lot of people forget that the Torah says you have to work. It's important. It's not part of the condition of the rest is actually having to work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath unto your Lord. And if you shall do any manner of work, you, your son, your daughter, your manservant, your maidservant, your cattle, your stranger within your gates, it says, okay, and that explains, for 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth and the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. So this is a commemoration of God's creation. It's a commemoration of God's creation of the world. And this day of rest and reflection, the day of rest and reflection is supposed to be a way for us to meditate on this creation of the world. Of course, the idea of stopping work is that we stop being creators, right? We stop doing creative work, and instead we leave everything to God. We say, okay, it says 6 days of the week, I'm busy cooking and cleaning and doing and making videos and right and all these things. But on the seventh day, I sit back and I say, this is your world and you're taking care of it. I'm just here to eat, drink, pray, and sleep, and study. You can do that. So now number 5 says, honor your father and mother so that your days may be long upon the land which the Lord has given you. It's very interesting. I'm trying to remember who it was. I forget where it was. There was, I think again, it's in the Talmud that somebody said, oh no, yeah, they quote, they said, when did the Jewish people begin to accept these rules? They said that on number 5, right? On number 5. So you'll notice, by the way, there's a clear division here. Number 1, right? Number 1 through 4, right? All have to do with God. And numbers 5 through 10 all have to do with man, right? Has to do with human beings. So it says, honor your father and mother. So it says they accepted it at this because up until now, God sounded like any other ancient deity, right? Think about it, right? If you lived in Mesopotamia, right? Every ancient deity said, pray only to me, pray to me, pray to me. I'm great. I'm wonderful. You should have holidays for me. You should celebrate me, right? Me, 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 me. But with number 5, God expresses it's not about me only, right? The way that you serve me is not just by serving me, it's also by serving other people, beginning with your parents, right? It's serving by beginning with your parents because your parents are, with me, the partners in your creation, right? So number 5 is kind of a transition, right? Because the father and mother would not be father and mother without the participation of God. Right? They wouldn't be father. There's no way they can do that on their own, right? God has to provide the spiritual component, the soul of the human being, right? In addition to all that wonderful biology. So you have to honor your mother and father. Here again, there's a difference between the two versions. So here it says, honor your father and mother, and in Dvarim, in Deuteronomy, it says, fear your mother and father. Right? Fear your mother and father. Fear, meaning here, be in awe of, or respect. Actually, probably a better way of respecting. So honoring and respecting. So the rabbis explain it, again, that these were given at the same time. And honor means to take care of, right? Honor means to take care of, not in a grudging way, but in a loving way. Right? To lovingly care for your parents. And why does it say father instead of father and mother, and puts the father first? Because your mother, right? Because she takes care of you and she nurtures you. Okay, at least in those days, because she cares and nurtures you, you're much more likely to have those kinds of generous, wonderful feelings towards her, and honoring her is going to be much easier. But your father, it may be more difficult, right? Because he's the person who's likely to be the disciplinarian. Sometimes in the older days, men were a little bit more distant, probably still in some places that's true. And so to take care of and honor the father would be more difficult. So therefore it says, honor your father and mother, right? With the father first. And when it comes to respect, it says respect your mother and your father, because it might be harder to respect your mother, right? Because she's the one who's closer to you, more intimate. The father may be kind of more disciplinarian. And so it says respect your mother first, and your father, because that might be more natural. Okay. Sixth, do not murder. Very often people translate this as thou shalt not kill. Well, it does not say thou shalt not kill. It says you shall not murder, because there are times when it's perfectly permissible to kill, right? In self-defense, for example, it's permissible to kill. In some circumstances, in war, it's permissible to kill. In a death penalty, in a of course arrived at appropriately a death penalty, one can kill. So you shall not murder means you shall not kill illicit. You not shouldn't kill for illicit reasons. You shall not commit adultery. So this one, I'm gonna get myself in trouble here. So adultery applies. So strictly speaking, in Jewish law, adultery is when a married woman is with anybody but her husband, is adultery. So for example, a married man, right? Let's say a man is married, right? And he has an affair with an unmarried woman, for example. So that is not a good thing. It's not permitted for men. It's not permitted for other reasons, right? But it's not technically adultery if he could conceivably be married to that woman, right? Because he can theoretically be married to more than one woman, that would not be considered to be adultery, right? If, however, right, if a single man or a married man were to have a relationship with a married woman, that would be adultery. So that's the right. Now, it doesn't mean that it's permitted, right? It doesn't mean those other relationships are permitted. They're not permitted, but they're not strictly speaking adultery, right? There's znut, right? Which is inappropriate. Znut would be like zina, right? Inappropriate sexuality, but it's not strictly speaking adultery. So you shall not steal. And again, it's a bad translation because this actually appears elsewhere in the Torah. So one of the principles of Torah interpretation is that we kind of imagine that God is communicating on old Twitter. Do you remember on Twitter before it used to be 40 characters, right? You could only communicate in 40 characters. And was it 40 or was it 140? I forget what it was, but it was really tough to say anything because you had to pare it down to make sure that it was very, very short. So we assume that that's how God communicates with us, that he's trying to say what he has to say in the shortest amount. Now, already earlier in the Torah, we were told not to steal, right? We were told not to steal. And here again, right, tells us not to steal. So the question is, okay, so why would it tell us that twice? So it has to refer to two different things. And the assumption here is that that this means not stealing, but kidnapping. You shall not steal a human being, right? Elsewhere, it deals with property. Pretty very clearly, it's talking about property. Okay, so here, if it's not talking about property, then it has to be talking about stealing human beings. So no kidnapping, no kidnapping. And number 10, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor, right? So this is generally speaking about lying. Specifically, though, it's about accusing your neighbor, accusing somebody else of a crime, and swearing to that in court. but about lying in general, right? That you don't lie about about other people, particularly if it's accusing them of something that they did not do. And lastly, you shall not covet your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, his manservant, his maidservant, his ox, his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. It's very interesting. The Torah does not legislate feelings, right? It doesn't legislate feelings. The reason for that is because it's impossible to legislate feelings, right? I can't tell you, you know, as a hate this can, right? Hate this can. Well, you know, you're going to have your own feelings about this can. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't like it, you know, but your feelings are not something that I can command you to have. It's not possible. So when it says here, you shall not covet, it's not saying, right? It's not saying, you know, if you look over at your neighbor's wife and think, wow, my neighbor has a really nice wife, right? My neighbor's wife, wow, right? Or your neighbor's house, wow, my neighbor's that's quite a house. I wish I had a house like that, right? Or to think, you know, he's got a great ox, he's got a great donkey. Wow, that is an amazing donkey that my neighbor has. I wish I had a donkey like that, right? He says that is, you know, maybe that's not a good thing, but you can't legislate that. You can't make a law against it. What I can make a law against is making any kind of plan in order to acquire what it is that my neighbor has. So if I like his wife, if I like his wife, you know, and I'm thinking to myself, you know, wow, he has a really nice wife. I wish I had a nice wife like that. I'm going to think of a way to get her away from him. That would be coveting, right? Or if he has a really nice donkey, right? And I'm trying to think, well, okay, I'm gonna lure his donkey right over to my paddock. That would be coveting. That would be coveting, right? So coveting is kind of it's an action here, not just a thing. Obviously, now it's not good to be jealous of. It's not good to be jealous of other people, and you want to avoid that as much as possible, right? But at the same time, you want to it's at the same time. Oh, right. And at the same time, you also you can't legislate that. So don't make any plans. And those are the 10 Commandments. You just got the 10 Commandments. There's a story that a rabbi was once visited. There were two rabbis. One was named Shammai and one was named Hillel, and they lived in the first century. And Hillel was a very kind of gentle sort of character, very open and generous and kind. And Shammai was a little bit sharper. He was a sort of sharper personality. And there was a man who wanted to convert to Judaism, or so he said. He was a Greek, and he came to the house of Shammai, and he said to Shammai, he says, Shammai, he says, if you teach me the Torah standing on one foot, he says, I will become Jewish. So Shammai, who was also a carpenter, took his measuring stick and slapped the guy in the head and said, get out of here, go away. So he knocks on Hillel's door, Rabbi Hillel, and he says to him, if you can teach me the entire Torah on one foot, he says, I'll become Jewish. And he says, he stands on one foot. He says, love your neighbor as yourself. All the rest is commentary. Go learn. So, so so I gave you the 10 Commandments standing on one foot, so to speak. So that's the one-footed version of the 10 Commandments.
Wow, amazing. Thank you so much, Rabbi Weissman. That was beautifully explained, and thank you. Do you have any questions, Dr. Zahir, about for
Yes, most certainly. Thank you very much, Rabbi Weissman. It was very, very enlightening. Uh, one of the things that I wanted to know was that this understanding that these were the commandments of the words of God that were inscribed in the tablets. Is that what the understanding of history is?
Yes. So the first set of tablets, were inscribed with these 10 commandments. And then the second set of tablets. So the first set of tablets, he comes down from the mountain. He sees the golden calf and sees the party around the golden calf, and they slip from his hands, or he throws them. It's not actually clear, and they break. So he goes back up for 40 days, and he comes back down. And God says to him, before he comes back down, God says, carve for yourself a second set, right? Carve for yourself a second set of the same commandments. And he brings the second set, and those were brought, and they were put into a cabinet, and that cabinet was kept inside of the Mishkan, which was the portable worship place that was in the desert, and then later in the temple.
So they were virtually rocks on which.
Yeah. Right. So
Okay.
they were relatively small. They were 6 cubits by 6 amma by 6 amma. So is about 18 inches.
Okay.
Yeah, about 18 inches wide, and divided into two in almost in like a square, and inscribed and made out of sapphire.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we still have them, or they're lost?
Well, they're lost. They're lost, but maybe we know where they are. There are all sorts of theories about where they are, that they may be under the Temple Mount, under where the Dome of the Rock is, actually, not under. They may be buried under there, in a chamber under there. That's possible. But other than that, the Ethiopians claim that they're in Ethiopia.
Okay.
Take that for what it's worth.
Right.
But there are a couple places in the world where I think they actually have claims that they are, but nobody's for sure where they are.
You mentioned other than these 10 commandments, 603 other expectations, commandments, or whatever one would like to call them. Do we know their sequence? Did it all start from the 10 commandments and then were followed up by 603 others? Is that the sequence?
No, there are commandments that are given before the 10 commandments, including the first commandment given to humanity, which was to reproduce, right, to have children. That's the first commandment. There are and then other commandments given subsequently. So the total is 613. Interesting. Everybody agrees that there are 613. Not everybody agrees on what the 613 are. There are a couple of variations on which exactly are the 613. Everybody agrees on the number. Not everybody agrees on exactly which is, how to define the exact commandments. Not all of them apply to everybody, right? So many of the commandments, so there are commandments for kings, for example, right? But those obviously don't apply to me. I'm not a king. There are commandments for people who are for the priests, for the descendants of Aaron, the brother of Moses. So those, of course, wouldn't apply to me. There are mitzvot that apply to women that don't apply to men. There are mitzvot for men that don't apply to women. So there are some variations. So
Dr. Lale, am I allowed this luxury to continue?
Please carry on. Please carry on.
Okay. You see, one of the things that one continues to wonder is that's fine. It really was a very clear mention of the Almighty's expectations in the form of a law
mm,
coming to mankind through Prophet Moses. But quite obviously, the Almighty's expectations from humankind began from Adam onwards.
mhm.
So, what exactly was happening before this?
Well, that's a very good question. So so we believe that there's a pre-existing covenant, that there's a pre-existing covenant, that after the world was destroyed, right? So first of all, right, there's Adam, right? First of all, there's Adam. And he gets the order, right? He gets the order that his job, right? He gets the order that his job is to maintain the garden, right? And then he's sent out into the world, right? And his job is to have children, build civilization, and so forth, right? And of course he's already had his encounter with God. And so there's an Adamic, right? There's Adam's covenant, so to speak. And then there's a covenant with the prophet Noah, right? So Noah comes off of the ark, and humanity is now essentially starting over, right? Humanity is now essentially starting over. And so part of that fresh start is the revelation of a universal religion, so to speak. Now, traditionally, the way we talk about that, I'm trying to get away from this a little bit, but we talk about it in terms of 7 commandments, right? So there's the 10 commandments, right? But there's also the 7 before that. Okay, there are 7 commandments that are given to the prophet. They're given to the prophet Noah, and which apply to all mankind, right? So they consist of not killing, right? Of not murdering, not stealing, not torturing animals, having a system of courts, no sexual no sexual promiscuity, and so forth. And of course, believing in one God, no blasphemy, right? Not blaspheming God, all of that. So those 7 laws, if you were to expand them, right, actually cover a pretty big chunk of the 613, right? If you think about it, the laws of when you say don't steal, okay, that's all of business law, right? That involves integrity in business. That means weights and measures. It means a lot of stuff, right? That's involved in not stealing, right? There's a lot of things involved in not stealing. And similarly, when it comes to not killing, right, to not murdering, right, there's a lot of things in there. All the laws of war and appropriateness in war, and when it says to set up a legal system, right, a system of justice, that you have to have a system of justice. That's also a very big thing, right, and requires a lot. So that to us is the universal religion of mankind. And a person who practice the problem with that, and the reason why I said about the 7 laws is because the rabbis were silent on what that would look like in terms of worship, in terms of how people would behave, right? it's given as, okay, here's the deal that's made with mankind, right, through the prophet Noah, and that deal is, here are these things, 6 things you don't do, 1 thing you do, right, without talking about, okay, so what would religion really look like? Like, what would that be like? And I think, obviously people are expected to have religious expression, expected, to pray and to, and to pray and so forth. So it's an unclear picture, but that's the universal religion of mankind, and anybody who practices it has the world to come, right? Has the world to come. Now, Judaism, what we call Judaism, revelation of the Torah, is a kind of training course, so to speak, for the priests of that universal religion. I mean, which is a strange, right? So it's a special special discipline and refinement of it, in order to train people to be able to share that universal religion that we mentioned before. So really the Torah it's interesting. The Torah exists, one way of understanding is the Torah exists in service of the universal religion.
Okay, right. You mentioned that there are 2 versions of the 10 Commandments, one in Exodus and the other in Deuteronomy.
Yes.
And we've got in all 13 commandments. So do we have an understanding of, starting from Genesis and Exodus and Numbers and Leviticus and Deuteronomy, is there an understanding that some of them are talking about the law and others are talking about history, or are they all spread across 5 books?
Yeah, so you kind of, it's interesting. The the Torah, one of the big questions about the Torah is, if the Torah is a book of law, then let's start with laws, right? Well, we'll start with laws, but it doesn't start with laws, right? It starts with the story of creation, and then it goes on to Abraham and his family, and starts talking about, and then it goes into Abraham and his family, and Jacob, it's Yitzhak and Jacob, and the long story of Yosef and the brothers and all these things. And then eventually, right, and eventually gets to start talking about law. And there are big chunks, swaths of the Torah that deal only with law. But kind of mixed together with the narrative. So, and that's true not just for the Torah, but I think for all Jewish literature. It kind of goes back and forth between law and things which are more philosophical or spiritual or ethical, and the fact that there's no line between those things is really important, because we believe there isn't a line between those things, right? There's no line between ethics and law. There's no line between spirituality and law. Those things are intertwined. And so you can be, it's amazing, love your neighbor as yourself, right? Probably the most beautiful, unbelievable statement, right, in the entire Torah, right? Love your neighbor as yourself is in the middle of a discussion of inappropriate sexual relationships. It's like, it's, a list of all the people that you're not allowed to be connected to. And think to yourself, like, oh, really? This is where you put this? It talks about not holding a grudge. You shouldn't hold a grudge, and you should love your neighbor as yourself. And while we're at it, let me tell you every person that that's forbidden to you. It's a very strange place to put it, but the idea is as just like this, which is clearly this beautiful, wonderful thing is God's will. So also this, which is a little more difficult and hard to read and hard to wrap your brain around and hard to even imagine, this is also God's will. This is also about pleasing your creator. And that they're at some level on the same plane, because your goal is to please your creator and have a relationship with your creator.
Right. Dr. Lale, I can go on and on. Please, you ask your question.
Honestly, I'm just I'm speechless, so please carry on.
Okay. Thank you very much. I mean, I'm so excited. I've got so many questions in mind, and I'm sure that one program would not suffice for it. Dr. Weissman, we proceed from Noah to Abraham, and we know that Abraham is a very special servant of God, and he's a prophet of outstanding stature. And what we understand is that the Almighty decides after him that all guidance to mankind is going to be to proceed through him and his progeny. Now, I'm sure you must have thought about it, and I keep worrying about it. What did God have in mind for the rest of the mankind? I mean, clearly, not all humanity is the children of Abraham. So what about others?
That's a really good question. Yeah, I'm also troubled by that. One of the one of the things which I find very, very troubling, I'm telling you the truth, is like what was expected of the rest of the world? I don't know. And the Torah is also like, it's completely silent about the rest of the world. It's as if, there's the land of Israel, there's Bnei Yisrael, and there's their neighbors. Okay, so you have a couple of neighbors. You have the Pelishtim, the Philistines. You have the Moabites. You have these. You have the various tribes that are living in the neighborhood, right? Some of which seem to be kind of semi monotheistic, maybe, but mostly are idol worshippers, and then just try to keep away from them. And nothing about the rest of the world. Nothing about the rest of the world. And it's perplexing. It's perplexing. I mean, the idea, okay, there's this law of Noah that, right, there's this universal religion that people are supposed to follow, but like, okay, so there's no description in the Torah really about what that's about, right? About what that really looks like and how it's going to spread and who exactly is going to spread it, right? It's a very good question. And even the family of Ishmael, it doesn't say what they're going to do, right? It doesn't say what they're going to do. And obviously, I think we understand now that the family of Ishmael, had their own brand of monotheism. You look at the pre-Islamic, right? You look at pre-Islamic names and things like that, and it's very clear that there was an Abrahamic, there was an Ibrahimi religion, right? There was an Ibrahimi religion that was carried by Ishmael and by his family, and that existed in the Arabian Peninsula, independent of Judaism, independent of Christianity. But the Torah doesn't say anything about that. The Torah doesn't say anything about that. It's so focused on the very narrow mission of Bnei Yisrael, and it's troubling because then I think part of it is we also live in such a different world. We suddenly realize that we're forced to know, like, that there is this huge world out there. I don't imagine that ancient Israelites ever imagined Amazonian Indians. They just didn't. They just didn't. But for me, I was like, my question is like, what are they supposed to be doing? Like, what is this supposed to look like for them?
Yeah.
And I don't have a good answer, unfortunately. I do wonder about it. I think about it a lot.
Yeah, let's keep thinking about it, because obviously, I mean, these are important questions which, as you rightly pointed out, in the modern times, they have surfaced more prominently because now we have the possibility of the entire world coming together. I mean, imagine, Dr. Lale is in the UK, I'm in Canada, you are in America, and we're all conversing with each other freely. This facility was never available before. Probably
Right.
people didn't even know that there were people existing elsewhere.
Right. Who knew?
So that's
Yeah.
right.
I
That's right.
looked at a text yesterday from the 1st century, and it said, it was talking about the Mediterranean Ocean, the Mediterranean Sea, and it says, the Mediterranean Sea, which surrounds the entire world. The Mediterranean Sea, which surrounds the entire world. What I think about, I guess if you lived there, right? I guess if you lived there at that time, you would think the Mediterranean Sea
Yeah, that's right.
the entire world, right?
That's true.
But in fact, I mean, it's just this. It's a pond. It's a very big pond.
That's true. That's true. Now, in the existing bigger context, it's a pond. I agree.
Right. The comparison to the to the oceans, it's a pond.
Absolutely. That's right. This understanding of what's happening in, let's say, the Indian subcontinent, the Hindus. Obviously, I mean, there are many explanations that need to be offered, but it seems that there was this light of God's will and His divine revelation, most probably coming to them through the descendants of Noah. But obviously, when you do not have a system of preserving the traditions, then there is a process of, if you don't want to call degeneration, a process of change does take place. So probably, we need to do something to explain what happened elsewhere in order for all religion to come together and all peoples of the world to be able to talk to each other without.
It's interesting, by the way. So it says in the Torah that when that after Abraham's wife Sarah died, he got married again. And he married a woman named Keturah, and which means it's a beautiful name, actually. It means incense. It means Bechor. And it said because her deeds were as her deeds were as fragrant as Bechor. They're as fragrant as incense. And the rabbis understand that this is Hagar. This is Hajar, that he remarries her, that he goes and he remarries her. And they have more children. And the Torah says that he sent his children with gifts to the east, whatever that means. Right? So many people have understood that to mean not just material gifts, but with spiritual gifts, and sent them eastward, to share them. And so some people understand. There's a his name is Matisyahu Glazerson, who wrote a book about this, and he talks about the kind of Abrahamic origin of some Hindu beliefs and Buddhist beliefs. I don't know if I believed it, but it's interesting. It's interesting.
It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I should say something too.
Yes.
Yes, you should.
But I was speechless, and that was so beautiful. Thank you so much. I don't really have any questions apart from which is quite a big topic, and perhaps we can do it at another time, is talking about Shabbat. But I'd just like to say a comment from my understanding is that God is just and fair and most gracious and compassionate. And my understanding of our Creator is that the more he has given us, the more we can give. So the children of Israel have been, given a lot of knowledge in the Torah, and it's a big burden of responsibility. And other people in the world may not have been given that, but I think less would be expected from them, from the Creator. So my understanding is that he judges us according to truth and how we seek truth and how we incline towards truth. So somebody living in the jungle will be judged according to, what he's been given. He may not be able to read. He may not be able to write. He may not even be able to speak. He may just, let's say he just makes noises, whatever. But if his heart is pure and, that's how God created him, then that's all he can give. And there's a purpose for that. There's a purpose for it. There's a purpose, and every person in the world has this purpose and in their unique way. And my understanding is that different covenants and different relationships with the Creator for different people. And like you said, these Noahide commandments, perhaps. And it's really fascinating that I've come to the understanding that perhaps, and I may be wrong, and may God guide us to higher levels of understanding, that maybe the Quran is for the, with the Noahide, this religion, this universal religion that you're talking about. I don't see any contradiction in the Quran against that. And perhaps maybe could it be that, and what followed, the 5 books of Moses for the rest of the world, and is the Torah just for the, just for the Jewish people, or is it for the rest of the world? Because if it's the responsibility of the rabbis to share these universal commandments with the rest of the world, where does that come from? As you said, it's not that clear, perhaps in the 5 books of Moses. So if that responsibility is on them to share that light with others, where will they get this from? That's my question, I guess. It's a big, long way.
So there are 2 questions there. So the first thing is, I get asked all the time, right? I get asked all the time. Do you think that Muslims will go to heaven? Do you think Muslims will go to heaven? And the answer to that is very simply yes, right? Why? Because it fulfills if you're looking at the universal religion, right? It fulfills all the conditions of the universal religion, right? There's no whatever is on top of that, right? In terms of how many times you pray, right? How many times you pray or fasting, whatever else, whatever is on top of that. The main thing is these ethical principles and monotheism, right? And all of those ethical principles, and certainly the monotheism, are included in Islam. So Islam is certainly fulfills the conditions of the universal religion. At the same time, I was just thinking about this the other day because I saw a video of one of these kind of Dawa groups going to they went to the Amazonian jungle, right, to convert people. And there they are in this village, and they're getting people to repeat something, to repeat in Arabic. And, the entire village is saying, La ilaha illallah. And I'm pretty sure they don't really understand completely what it is they're saying. I don't know how well they understand who this Muhammad is that they're talking about. I was a little doubtful about the whole thing. And I thought to myself, okay, so what are you doing there? So you could be, right? On the one hand, I'm thinking, well, this is great. This is great because you're communicating, right? You are communicating the universal religion to people who maybe never had it before, right? And the concept of one God, and that the one God is served not just through ritual, but also through ethics, by the way that you treat people and so forth, right? Good, 100% good. The part that, the part that was troubling to me, I'm being very honest, was that you're also sort of selling a culture, right? You're also sort of selling a culture, right? And a culture and a form that may always be kind of alien for them. And I feel the same way, there's a bunch of people who converted to Judaism in Uganda, right? And, there they are singing in Hebrew, that's great. But like, should they be singing in Hebrew, or should they be singing in their own language? They'd be singing in something that they understand,
I know
right?
exactly, and this is actually what I was mentioning about the jungle, the person in the jungle who can't speak, whatever. Like I'm talking about when I don't mean the culture part. I don't, my understanding is that, there can be millions of different cultures and still they can all abide by the universal religion.
Mhm.
And ultimately, my understanding is that the universal religion is actually that fitra that God created all of us with, that the nature that we've all been created with. So it's that book is actually inside of our heart, that it's something that is not outside of us, it's inside of us. And the person in the jungle has access to it, even without books, actually. That's my understanding. And it's about treating your neighbors, you how you want to be treated. And it's about you, but you do need to use your intelligence, and
Right.
you do need to use your intelligence, and obviously according to what God has given a person, because some people might have more intelligence than someone else, but again, they will be judged according to how much intelligence they've been given, or how, their environmental factors and how they use it. But we all have that responsibility to use whatever we've been given in the service of God, and that can look different to different people in different places. But I that's my understanding. So I'm not talking about the culture part. Like I think the Islam, when I think there's there's an Islam that was sort of, a religion that's come about after Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and that involves the traditions and things like that. And then there's, from the Quranic perspective, there's also an Islam that it describes about the I mean, what does Islam, it's like shalom, isn't it? Peace. It means, Islam, salam, peace. And my understanding is it's the way that we are, the way that we choose to be, and that, surrendering our will to a higher will, and serving our creator brings us to a religion of peace. It's like a state of peace more, it's like a way of life more than a religion, actually, perhaps. And it's that way of life that is perhaps the universal, the I don't mean the cultural, I'm not talking about that other,
Right. I think we lost touch to some extent with that sort of I get natural in the sense of fitra. Okay, in fitra, like we've lost touch with, I think, that
well, we have, but in the
natural impulse, and being able, how do you uncover that in a person, and then how do you cultivate that in a person, and
I think
Let
Abraham is a
me say,
great example.
let me say, these are very important topics, and we can discuss them in the subsequent sessions.
We've run out of
We have
time.
gone beyond the time limit.
Diving.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So good. We have next session. We can continue on.
Yeah,
And
we will.
Yes, God willing, next session.
God willing,
Would
inshallah.
you, inshallah, like to talk about the Ten Commandments from
I will, from the Quranic perspective, I'll say a few things. Thank
Excellent. That'd be
Thank
Thank
great.
you very much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate
very
it.
much.
Thank you so
Hari
much.
Krishna.
God bless you both. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
for.
you. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Shalom.
Shalom.